over the questions from the last week quiz. See. I know not all of them are difficult, so we'll go through them quickly. The book of Exodus recorded the names of 2 midwives because they feared God more than Pharaoh. Yes. They were of the tribe of Moses. No, we don't know which tribe they were from. They were Egyptians but helped the Jewish mothers. No, they were actually Jewish, or Israelites. Better say Israelites. Jewish means the tribe of Judah. They were the ancestors of Christ. No, they were not the ancestors of Christ. There were other women that were ancestors of Christ. The book of Exodus showed us that God is going to accomplish salvation beginning with women in the book of Exodus. In the burning bush, Moses posed 5 objections. They included all the following except one of them is wrong. The Israelites would question his credibility. Yes, they did. And he anticipated it. The Israelites would ask him what the name of God is, and they did. And he asked God for his name. So both of them are true. C, the Israelites would ask him where the promised land is. This one thing he didn't mention. We're not talking about the promised land. Moses wanted God to send someone else. This was the 5th objection. He said, just send anybody else, not me. The 3rd question, the Exodus definition of a prophet is someone who foretells the future. And this is a question to test your knowledge of the true meaning of a prophet. It is not someone who tells the future or do miracles or somebody who writes a biblical book. It is only to tell that a prophet is a spokesman on behalf of another. The prophets of God are the spokespeople of God. They might be men and sometimes they were women. The prophet is speak on behalf of God. That's the answer, 3C. The 9th plague of the 10 plagues was the darkness. So it's B. Not the locust, not the death of the firstborn was the 10th plague, not the gnats. Question number 5, I think, had most of the repetition, the repeat. God made 4 promises to Israel. They included their redemption, their future royal line, their promised land, the establishment of a temple worship. The only promise, so the 4 promises given to Israel is their sanctification. He said, I am Yahweh. That's the beginning. So they consider this as a sanctification promise that he will make them holy. And the 2nd promise is a judgment. I will judge the Egyptians to take you out of their hands. And the 3rd one is I will redeem you to become my people. And means they were lost in Egypt and then they will be redeemed again. And the 4th, I will take you to be in my promised land. So the promised land itself was promised to Abraham, but their going there is the promise, not the promised land itself. They're going there to be taken to be living there. This is called the consummation promise, the 4th promise. But the 3rd promise was the redemption. The only correct one in this is A, the redemption. And that's the 3rd promise with a 3rd cup of wine. We call it the cup of salvation. And this is the cup that Jesus took to make his own blood. The Passover is the beginning of Israel history, correct? The Passover meal is a communion meal. Yes, it was made of a lamb that was offered to God as a sacrifice, but eaten by the Israelites, so it's a communion meal. The firstborn males were consecrated by Passover, that's true, then all of above. To match. Bitter herbs, it meant or symbolized their hard slavery. The Egyptians made the Israelites' life bitter. So bitter herbs to remember that bitterness. The matzah, which is unleavened bread, and this hinted to the sanctification. They are clear of the leaven, clear of sin of Egypt. Cups of wine represented God's promises. The 4. Passover lamb, this represented the consecration of the firstborn. That God has bought the firstborn, like he had done with Isaac. Passover Haggadah. There is a difference between Haggadah and Seder. What's a Seder and what's a Haggadah? Haggadah comes from a Hebrew word that says to tell, to narrate. And this meant the dialogue or the written words that had to be recited during Passover. So it's like exactly your Psalmodiya or your Khulagi book, the book of the written words of the liturgy. So the written word is the Haggadah, but the meal itself is the Seder. The festive meal that you start the Passover with is the Seder. So Passover Seder is the items that's eaten. That would be the matzah, the bitter herbs, the wine, the Passover lamb. This is the Seder. But the words that will be recited in that Seder is the Haggadah. So, and that would say the Haggadah means the rite of Passover, the retelling of Passover story, the meal that starts Passover feast. So the rite is the bigger thing. It's everything. Whatever is said and whatever is eaten. And that's divided into two. The Haggadah and the Seder. The Seder is the meal. The Haggadah is retelling of the Passover story. Exodus chapter 15 contains the first ode of our psalmody, midnight praise, the crossing of the Red Sea, it's the first Passover, or the consecration of the firstborn males. Start from the bottom. Consecration of the firstborn males was done in chapter 13. The first Passover was chapter 12, before it. The crossing of the Red Sea was chapter 14, and the first host was chapter 15, after they finished crossing, and they see the Egyptians dead. The Lord is his name. This was in the song of Moses and the Israelites in chapter 15. What does it mean, the Lord? The Hebrew word that is originally written is Yahweh as his name. Remember what Moses asked God, and he said, what's your name so I can tell them? And he said, my name shall be what I shall be. And many of the commentators and the rabbis thought this meant he's telling Moses, let the Israelites wait until they see what I do in Egypt. Then they will know who I am. Because every name in the Old Testament denotes a character. So we hear about Adam, taken from the ground. That's the meaning of the name. Woman means taken from a man. Eve, the mother of all living. When you say Edom means red. Then Jacob means the one who catches the heel of his brother, somebody who's coming after someone, wanting to take things from him. When you say Isaac means laughter. Abraham, the father of generations. So all the names have a meaning to do with the characters of the person. So what's the character of God? He said, you will know when I'm done with Egypt. You will know everything about me, and as much as I can tell you. So now they have seen everything God done. So they said, Yahweh is his name. We know who he is, in a way. So the word, well, the Lord is his name, meant Israel loved the name of God. That's not what is meant. The Lord was the name of God. No. Israel knew God through his actions. Absolutely, yes. So they knew God. They knew now the name meant something to them because he showed them that he's stronger than all the gods of Egypt. And he is the God of heaven and earth, and everything is in his control. This is my this is my God, and I will glorify him. Glorify, nava, that's a Hebrew word, means to beautify his place, to sing praise to his name, to lift God's name high, to obey his commandments. Actually, to beautify his places. Here comes the idea of us working and building places for God and for saints, and we make it very beautiful. We put icons, we use different colors, we use all what we can to make the most beautiful place for God, to enshrine, that's the word for it, enshrine, to make his place beautiful. And your love, and the word love here in Hebrew is chesed, and in your love you led the people whom you redeemed. The word love is the Hebrew word hesed. It means favor, it means faithfulness, or it is A and C. It is A and C. It's Hesed is the word, and it might mean faithfulness, among many other words. To be faithful to your own family members, to your children, your wife, your father, your husband. That's the word means. It's Hesed. So when you read love, in your love, and you can read it actually mercy. In your mercy. That's where you get the word Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy is not somebody trying to avoid punishment. No. Lord have mercy means bring me back to that status of being loved as a child to you. And it goes all the way to that complete, perfect taking care of. To be taken care of completely and perfectly. So that's the word Hesed, that is the original word for the Hebrew, for the English that translated love or mercy in the New Testament. Any questions about this? So we go into the new document, and it's a little bit rich today, so I want us to pay attention because it's filled with stuff. It's filled with stuff. So we're going into the covenant itself, the covenant at Sinai. And this needs complete attention, please. I'll try my best to make it entertaining and interactive and whatever you call it, but unless you are giving your full attention, I don't think I'll be successful. Let me see, it is OT. Okay. The second part of this covenant study that we're going through is the covenant at Sinai. We started by talking about the plagues and the darkness, the Passover, and the crossing of the Red Sea. And we said the components of any covenant is God's calling. Number one, the response of faith by people. And we saw God's calling in Abraham, and we see it also in Israel by God calling Moses. And he called him with the burning bush. Moses made objections. God overcome the objections. Now he's going to go and call the people. This time, different than Abraham and Noah, it is not on Moses, it's on the people. So God's going to call the whole hundreds of thousands. So how are you going to do that? He's not going to go and meet everybody in their houses. And Abraham, it was easy. It was one man with his family. Noah, the same thing with his family. Now you have the people of God as multiple. So what do you do? If you're the counselor of God, if that's possible, it's crazy. What would you ask him to do? Would you tell God, go into each house and deal with every family alone with the head of the family? Or would you ask him to do what? To bring one person, talk to him, convince him to be or commission him to be the liaison, the mediator. So from now on, you're going to have somebody that actually acts as a mediator, which is, we just defined him as a prophet. He is the mediator. Prophets will be the mediators between God and his people. Since God's people now is not a single family. They are nation. They're huge. But God is actually going to do something more. If he's going to do the covenant with the people, he's going to have that prophet prepare them to meet God face to face. He's not going to abandon this idea of talking to them and have their response to him directly, which is crazy. Who is going to do that? Which God have you ever heard about in history that will invite a whole nation to make a covenant with him? I've never heard about it. It's not written in history. None of the Egyptian gods or the Roman gods have done this. They always appear to somebody, and that someone would say, I've met God and I know he lives there and he told me to do so and so. It's up to you to believe or not. But to bring the whole nations to meet you, this is crazy. So he used Moses as a prophet not to be just a mediator, but to bring the people to make a personal covenant with each family, with each one of them. So this is the idea now. So he called Moses called the people, and the people responded in faith. See, the letter to the Hebrew says, they believed Moses. They believed because he had signs. He brought signs to them. So how did you know that they believed? Two things, major things, the letter to the Hebrews bring in. He says, when he told them to sacrifice the Passover lamb, what did they do? They did it or didn't do it? They did it, which means they believed. When he asked them to cross the Red Sea after it's opened, they did it or didn't do it? They did it. So they responded in faith. We call that the righteousness of faith. They proved worthy of the calling of God because they trusted God and listened to the calling. So the first item was the calling and the response. The second item is they have to go through a cleansing process. Once they get approaching God, to come into a relationship with God, they have to be cleansed from the world. God's going to take them to be His children. Let's say you are interested in adopting a child, and they tell you, we don't have much children for adoption except those homeless children in the ghettos, and there's a lot of them in the streets living in the mud. Okay? So you go and pick a child. It's like you're going to the pet store and picking a pet, right? And you look at it, you like it, it's cute, it's nice. And then what? You bring it to home. What is the first thing you do if they're bringing them from the mud? You have to clean them. So it is not something ritual. It's not something that you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, it is actually the natural process. You want to adopt somebody, you go pick them up, and they agree to come with you. What if the child starts kicking? I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I want to go with mommy. I want to go to this man. So you're just going to say, okay, can't take him against. They will always hold a grudge against you because you took them against their will. But then a second step would be to do what? To wash them. They need to be washed to bring them closer to God. All humanity outside of the relationship with God had marred themselves in mud. We marred ourselves by the fall of Adam. We grow out of the relationship with God in mud. So our relationship with God, to be restored, we have to be clean. Simple, straightforward. So the first thing he does is bringing them to him. He has to baptize them in the Red Sea. They go through the Red Sea to be baptized, and they shed off, they let go of Egypt. Egypt is kind of washed out of them. So then the next step, what to do? Through a sacrifice, and over the sacrifice, you will say your commandments. You've already made the promises. God already makes the promises ahead of time. He tells Abraham before he invites him out, I will do. So Abraham comes out. So he gave them the promises in chapter 6. He said, I am the Lord, I'm Yahweh. It means I will sanctify you, make you holy. He's going to do this all the time, make us holy all the time, all the time, all the time. Second one, I will judge the Egyptians to get rid of this control that they have over you. I will judge them. Third one, I will redeem you, bring you back to me, because you were mine when I sanctified Abraham, and I asked him to offer Isaac, and through Isaac on the altar, I took you to be my people. Now, I'm going to have to redeem you. I let you be in Egypt custody for a little bit, but now I want you back. I'm going to the pawn shop, I'm paying a price, the Passover lamb, to bring you back to me. So that's called redemption, to redeem, to take back. And I'm going to do this. That's the third promise. And the fourth promise, I'll bring you to the promised land to live with you and make my abode in your heart, in your center, in the temple. Those are the 4 promises. Now he's going to bring them to the mountain, and in the mountain, when they are on the mountain, he will show himself to them, and they will see God. And they will ask a very interesting question. Whoever out of all the nations had seen the Lord their God face to face and lived? We never heard about that. Never. And over that scene, God is going to start uttering the 10 words, the 10 commandments. And he would have them sign on those commandments. He says, as long as you consider yourself my children and I'm your God, you have to abide by those. You want to despise me? And he's going to say that to David when we were looking to David. You want to despise me? Break those commandments. You want to make me feel like I'm nothing to you? Break those commandments. And over that, Moses is going to take the blood of the sacrifices they just killed and sprinkle it on the book where he written all the commandments. He had written them one by one. And he says he spilled the blood over the commandments and also on the people. And what did he say when he spilled the blood and he started to sprinkle the blood? What did Moses say in chapter 24? He said, "This is the blood of the covenant that God has made with you." So this is the fourth step. So we said calling, response of faith, cleansing, sacrifice, and commandment. And by that you seal the covenant. It ends up with a meal. They have to end up with a meal, like any wedding, like any adoption. Once adoption formula is finished, what does the father do? They make a feast, celebration. This is like almost like, today I have a child, as if it is the birthday. So there is a meal. And the marriage is the same way. Once a person, a man and wife get married, after they finish the ceremony in the church, what do they do usually? They celebrate, where everybody's invited. So in this, you finish with a meal. So again, what's the steps of the covenant again? It's natural progress of any covenant. 1, calling, God calls. 2, the response of faith, we call it righteousness of faith. 3, the cleansing. They have to have some purification process. I cannot take someone who is dirty to be in my house, which is very clean, unless first I do what? It's my responsibility that I wash them. They get washed. And then the fourth is a sacrifice with the commandments. I'm going to say the commandments. And end up with a celebration meal that we gather together and eat and have fun. That's how a covenant is made in old times and in the new times. Now, I'm going to ask the questions. Why the manna was and the rock? So on their way to the mountain, they needed to eat and drink. There was manna and the rock. How was the preparation for the covenant ceremony? What did Moses ask him to do and what God asked them to do before they get into the mountain? What is the role of the commandments in the covenant at Sinai? What did they mean, the commandments? What were the different aspects of the covenant ceremony? What measures were given in Deuteronomy to assure the keeping of the commandments? Since Moses knew these commandments are very detrimental, they are actually, if they break them, things will get bad. They will be very, very much in trouble. So he said, I will have to, and actually inspired by the Holy Spirit, to give some measures, certain measures, that they will never forget the commandments and keep remembering them all the time. Sometimes people, human beings, have a tendency to forget. You tell the child, didn't I tell you? For example, don't leave your plates on the table. Mom, I'm sorry, I forgot. So if this happens in something more serious, mom or dad will have to get some reminders for the child. To remind them, maybe write a little piece of paper on the table that says, please, under the plate or in front of the plate. Say, please take your plates to the sink when you're done. So when he's done, they see that. There's some measures they have to do. Someone who's doing not doing well in tests, they forget how to copy the question very clearly, and so they take with them a little piece of paper and they put it in the desk when they are making the test. Please watch for copying errors. Something like that. So there is some things that measures that Deuteronomy will say to the Israelites to make sure they don't forget. And they had no Holy Spirit, so there were no reminders inside of them. They had to do it from the outside. Yes? Huh? Okay. The first point, the Lord sanctifies his people. What does he do, God? And he's doing it. He did it with them, he's doing it with us. He's training his people for trust and obedience. You too. You want something spiritual to take home with you? All your life is trained for trust and obedience to God. Trust that things will go okay if you keep the obedience. Trust that God will take care of things eventually, even how bad it is right now, or whatever problems you go through. It will be okay at the end, because he is with us. So the first lesson that is about trust and obedience is the one in Mara. Mara is the first station. Why they call it Mara? The name was not Mara. They called it Mara. Mara means bitter. They get out of the Red Sea, They see the Egyptians dead. They get excited. They sing a song. Now they have to start the march to the Promised Land. They were supposed to be in the Promised Land in 40 days, maximum. They're going to spend 1 month by the Sinai, by the mountain, establish things, build the tabernacle. And then they move, and they suppose reach the Promised Lands in 10 days. 10 days after that. So 40 days. So all in all, from the coming out of Egypt will be 3 months. That's it, basically. And that's all what they needed to do. But what happened when they go through a place and they get thirsty? They find the pool of water. They start drinking from the pool. It's very bitter. The water is too bitter to drink. So they scream. And then this is the verse was given in chapter 15 after the song. And this will continue actually in different ways. There God actually told Moses, he showed him a tree. He said, take a branch from that tree, throw it in the water. He threw it in the water. What happened? He said, take from the water. The water was sweet. It was actually not bitter anymore. The fathers of the church, this is actually said the beginning of it is the cross. The tree that actually made the life sweeter for us is the cross. But he says there he made a statute, a law, and an ordinance for them. This is the beginning of the talk. And there he tested them and said, listen to this. This is the beginning of the journey. If you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. What's he saying? Fresh, before you forget. You came out of Egypt, there were 10 plagues. They're still fresh in your mind. Before you forget about those plagues, remember, I am the one who brought them. And if you listen to my commandments, he didn't give them the commandments yet. He's preparing them. If you listen to the commandments, none of those plagues will be in you. But if you start noticing that plagues are coming on you, it means you had forgotten and you did not do the commandments. So this is the beginning in Mara. And again, it is training for trust and obedience continuously. This is your life, their life, and mine. That we all are going to live our lives in training for trust and obedience every single day of your life. Every single day is almost like a camp, a boot camp for believing in God and obedience to him. That's how we see ourselves in our lives. That was the first test, that bitter water. He says, I'm turning the bitter water to sweet for you because I can do it. This is me. But you have to do what? So this is the mutual relationship in the covenant. He takes care of their needs. They do what? What's their portion of the covenant? What do you need to do? To trust and obey. Keep the commandments. Okay? The next test of obedience and trust is manna. Immediately, that's 15. At the end of 15, go into 16, the same thing happens again. We're hungry, we're so famished, we want some food. And they start thinking about, we need some meat. Okay? So, in Deuteronomy, Moses wrote this. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness, these 40 years? Listen, what is the reason? To humble and test again. The idea of testing. The humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Very interesting. You know this verse. But the background of it is this, that you actually are going to hunger, and this is when we go into fasting, to look always to God, not to the world. So the same question that Jesus asked Philip, Philip, where do we get bread for those people? What did Philip say? 200 denarii worth of bread. Where is his mind going? Is that trust? That's not trust. So when the Israelites in the Sinai, they're going to be hungry, what do you think? This is desert. Of course there's no food. That's obvious. You don't need a child to tell you that. So what should we do? What's the only solution for them? Go back to Egypt. Is that trust? That's not trust. So this is a test. It's a test. What will you do when you're hungry? What you will do when you're in need? What will you do? Will you stretch your hand to the world? Will you go back to the world and make the friendship that you broke? The manna is given to Israel on daily basis. The men would collect it from the ground every morning. God gave the Israelites specific instructions in collecting the daily bread. These instructions included, look at the instructions, collecting it daily except Saturday. Don't go look for it on Saturday. Why? I'm God. I told you to rest on Saturday, and one of the commandments I'm going to give you, keep that day holy. Don't work for food on it. This practice had double intention. Let's go to the intentions. Keeping the Sabbath holy, that's the first intention, that they actually listen to that one commandment that says do not work on the Sabbath. That's the first intention. The second intention, trusting God for every day's provision. Let's give us today our daily bread. That's what we say in Our Father. Then, and I love this from the wisdom. This piece from the wisdom is very beautiful. It's actually a bit longer, but I wanted to bring it here. The Book of Wisdom of Solomon. The Book of Wisdom of Solomon has lots of gold nuggets if you read it. Will be surprised by all the things that's written in it. You fed your people the food of angels, and without their labor you provided them with ready-made bread from heaven, fitting for every pleasure and suitable to every taste. For your provision manifested sweetness toward your people. Beautiful. It's like a poetry. What is that? God is sweet. God is sweet. And the manna was sweet. And they said, in the Book of Wisdom, it says it was fitting for every pleasure and suitable for every taste. Those who wanted it very sweet, unlike extremely sweet things dripping with honey, they found it very sweet. And those who didn't like it to be very sweet and they wanted to be a little bit less sweet, they found it less sweet. When they gathered a lot, nothing remained for the next day. They were actually measuring it by omer, and everybody got an omer. And someone who slacked a little bit, didn't collect a lot, it also fitted into an omer for everyone. It's miraculous. What is that? He says that God is showing His sweetness toward His people. So how much He loved them. But He's not spoiling them. He's not spoiling them. And the third one, the change in the manna that was kept overnight, was very significant. From a sweet wafer with honey that tasted and smelled so beautiful, to a stinky material that rotted and worms came out of it. And this is very interesting because you don't really, if you leave wafers, if you have wafers at home and you leave them for 10 years, what happened to them? Would they stink? No, wafers don't stink when you leave them. What do? They can get moldy. They change their taste a little bit, but not that dramatic change. It decayed like flesh, bred worms and stank. This was a sign of the fate of those who lacked trust in God to provide them daily with their needs. If you collect it and you fill the omers, you go back to the fields and collect again, what does that mean? You're not sure that God's going to bring it tomorrow. So maybe you should keep it because one more day is better to be safe. But this immediately resulted in a stinky house, a stinky tent. And its smell was so bad that immediately gave them in their faces a response. Why is that? I made a reference here, if you want to read it in the book, to the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 3. He said, those who did not trust God for their lack of faith, their bodies were thrown in the wilderness. They were stinky and wormy after they had done their life in the wilderness, never reached the promised land. What's that? It's a lesson. You're eating this stuff. If you're eating that stuff and you never had a day that stank in your house, you'll make it to the promised land. But if you didn't and it stank in your house, that means what? You don't trust God, you're not making it. You're not going to make it. Same thing for us today. If we don't have faith and trust in God, and we don't live daily on that test of trust, what happens? We too will not make it to heaven. That's the point. The next point, not to keep from it to the next day except on Fridays. This allowed the Israelites to abstain from working, as I said, on Sabbath, and was proof of the divine involvement in their daily life. Every day they're living by a miracle. Every day. Not just living it one day. Sometimes you think about this, I need to make one-time decision in my life and commit to God, and that's it. No. It's going to be a daily commitment you're going to do every day, and you're going to live by miracles every day. To keep one person's quota in a pot in the Ark of the Covenant and remained unchanged, never decayed. This remained with them for many hundred years, almost 1,000 years, until the Ark disappeared. What does that mean? That one quota, one person's portion of manna stayed forever. What does it mean? Means there is somewhere a food that when a person eats from it, it does not decay and will make them live forever. What's that? And why the Israelites couldn't eat from that? This was the manna that was in the Ark of the Covenant with the glory of God, the Shekinah, the glory, the presence of God was always there. So where God present is, no decay ever happened. No change ever happened. What is this pointing to? What is that food that will last for everlasting life that Jesus actually promised? The body and blood of Christ, that his presence is there. This is his divinity is always united to his humanity, never separated for a single moment or a twinkling of an eye. So when you eat that food, you're eating the hidden manna that was kept away from Israel. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 6, the Lord hinted to the manna as a type of the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the true bread from heaven, the food which endures for everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you because God the Father has set his seal on him. He's referring to both the chapter 16 in Exodus and to the wisdom verse that we said, the bread from heaven. Nowhere else it's written that the manna was a bread from heaven except in wisdom. So Jesus is hinting to wisdom too, the bread from heaven. The manna was God's special food for Israel. It was a daily practice in obedience and trust in God. The Eucharist is God's special food for us, through which we are consecrated as God's special people. The manna was a special food for special people. It was not given to everybody. So God is making them holy, not just by the Passover lamb, not by crossing the Red Sea, not by making miracles for them, but their food. They have a special food, and they have, we're going to see, special drink. The split rock. When Israel thirsted, God told Moses to strike a special rock in front of them. When Moses did, an explosion of water came out of the rock, splitting it in half. How do I know that it's split in half? It's not in Exodus. It's in the Psalms. I'm going to tell you about the Psalms soon. When the rock was split clean in half, in two, exactly in the middle. A burst of water made a lake under the rock for them to drink. The force of the water geyser reflected the force of God's care for his people. You're thirsty? Ya habbat aini, ya albi. You're thirsty? What happens when a child is thirsty and he says to his mom or dad, Dad, I'm thirsty. What do? They bring the whole fountain. They want to bring everything they can, right? So this is what God did. The amount of force in this rock to be split and to be shattered like this shows the care that God has for his people. This is the rock. It's one of the rocks, actually. There were many of them. We're going to say this in the Psalms. The verse for this, that's God, split the rocks in the wilderness, rocks with an S, is plural, and gave them drink in abundance like the depth. Abundance like the depth. Sometimes you think the rock was like a little rock with a trickle of water coming down, and if you have like 750,000 people standing in line with their jugs, with the trickle, how long do you think it's going to take for them to drink? you'll be able to finish maybe 10,000 people by the end of the week, and the rest of them will be dead, right? So this has to be, because he said, and you gave them drink in abundance, like the depth, you opened to them fountains of water. He also brought streams out of the rock and caused waters to run down like rivers. Like rivers, that's exactly it. And this is in Saudi Arabia, in the northern west area, south of Jordan, where they have this place, and the Saudis, actually the Bedouins, know that this is the Rock of Moses. The same force that can be seen in the cross of the Son of God. There was a force there. When the soldier stuck his side with the spear, what happened? Water and blood came out of it with force. The split rock represented Christ from the 1 Corinthians 10. They had to be many rocks in their way of wandering in the desert to support their journey. They would have to trust God for supplying water as well. This is the verse from Psalms. Go from wisdom. It's wisdom 16:20. And then all the references I said in the Psalms is 78, 16, and 17. Okay. The next point is preparing for the covenant ceremony. That's Exodus 19. So I skipped over 18. 18 is where Moses is given advice. Don't work as a single judge to this nation. Bring in other people to judge. So he made 70 judges, the heads. He took the leaders of the tribes and he made them into judges. We go into 19. And in 19, so we have 16 manna, 17 the split rock, 18 the judges, 19 is the preparation. Why did they have to prepare? I thought that we cleansed them in the Mount, in the Red Sea. Although they were clean for the ceremony in the Red Sea, and they had to be, they needed to have a special preparation for the day itself. So you might have your child washed from the muds and stuff, but then the ceremony is going to be in a couple of days where you actually sign the contracts and do this. So before you go to the church and do the wedding or sign the ceremony, you need to wash them, to wash at least their feet, their hands, their faces. So this is a minor cleansing, not the major one. So God told Moses to tell the Israelites of the very special place they have in God's heart. He told them, let them know how much they are to me, who they are. They are very special. So what is he saying? Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me. That's very tender, language. Say, you are my treasure. Who are we to God call us his treasure? Who are we? You are a treasure to me, he says. A special treasure to me. Above all people, for all the earth is mine. They're all mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests. This is why I told you, why did God needed an extra covenant with Abraham? He's saying it here, right? He's telling his people, they're all mine. But I want you to be an extra special people. Why? He's saying it. He's already made a covenant with Noah, and through Noah to the whole humanity. But he's going to zero on a little bit, focus on this group that belongs to Abraham. Why? A kingdom of priests, a holy nation. You will be the priest. Do you have priests? Can you make a priest without congregation? So who are they priests to? The whole earth. Because the earth is God's. All the people. So sometimes we say, the evil people, the people outside, and St. Paul said, we don't judge them. They belong to him. We have a job to do, and to be light and salt to the rest of them, to bring them closer to God, to show them the way to heaven. And all what I can judge is myself and us. I cannot judge the outsiders. That's not my job. So we are, and the Israelites were, the priest, kingdom of priests and holy nation. They were to meet God in 3 days. It's going to take them 3 days to be there, during which they needed to consecrate themselves. Said, You're going on there will be a very special day. And I told you this is the crazy thing. They're going to meet God face to face. They will see their God. Something, if you think about it, is to blow anybody's mind. Something crazy. So what did they needed to do? He told Moses, consecrate the people. Moses translated it to them. He said, God said this. Listen carefully. He said, tell the people to consecrate themselves and wash their clothes. Consecrate themselves and wash their clothes. So what does it mean to consecrate oneself? What does that mean? Moses translated it. To abstain from marital relationship with their wives. Okay. Why is that? Why is that important? That they abstain from sexual relationship between husband and wife. Is that wrong? Is that evil or defiling? Why? Any idea? Why we say too, when you come to communion, we should not have, those who are married people don't have a marital relationship the night before. Why? Not because it's wrong or it is evil. God forbid. God created it for the bond of husband and wife. Because it's a competition. To consecrate oneself is to do what? To totally, completely give oneself to God. In marital relationships, a person gives himself to the other. They give each other themselves. So it is going to be a little bit of a competition between giving myself to my spouse or giving myself to God. Body, soul, and spirit, everything. So to consecrate oneself it means that I'm going to prepare to give myself to God. That's exactly it. And to wash my clothes. Those are the two conditions that he said. For 3 days, do those things. When the day of the covenant came, the people got scared from the manifestations of the theophany. Early morning, God appeared on the mountain. There was fire, smoke, thundering, lightning, earthquake, trumpet sound. Imagine one of those just scares us. Thundering and lightning, when it's a little bit strong, people get a little bit scared. We're going to be burned. Put an earthquake on top of it. And then on top of that, also little fire and smoke on a mountain, huge fire and smoke. And add to that a trumpet that's very loud, and it keeps getting louder. If that doesn't scare you, I don't know what would, right? So they were scared, and rightly so. And the sound of the trumpet and the voice of words, they got them so scared. Now, after all that, with all this background music, God started to speak. And when God spoke from the mountain, they had no clue what he was saying. They didn't know what God was saying. Only Moses could hear him. And once they started to realize that they didn't understand God, what do you think happened? And the voice was very terrible, actually, terrible. Moses himself said, I am terrified. Moses was terrified, let alone the people. What do you think the people did? In the letter to the Hebrew, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. Stop, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear anything. Let's go. And they started running away from the mountain, very far from the mountain. They got so scared. When God started uttering the 10 Commandments, they asked Moses to stand between them and God to be the mediator. And what did they say? You speak with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. They got scared that God's continuing to speak. They would actually be killed. Although Moses himself was terrified, he understood the reasons of the strong theophany and reassured the people. He himself was afraid. What did he say? Do not fear. It's a little contradictory. Look at what he's saying and try to understand it without, breaking it down. Do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. Does it seem contradictory? Do not fear that his fear might be before you. What does it mean? He's saying to them, God is not going to hurt you. He's not. But he wants you to be aware of his awesomeness. He is an awesome God. So there is a fear and there is a fear. The fear of God that God is actually requiring of us is to keep him number one. To think of him, of God, as the most important person. Whatever he says has to be obeyed and followed. But not to be scared of him. This is the difference. To be scared of God to the degree that we run away from him. That's not the case. The Lord responded, I've heard the voice of the words of this people. They said, let's not talk to him again. Let him talk to us. You listen to what he's saying, and you come back and tell us, we listen to you. You become the mediator, the one in between. And what do you think God would say? They refused to listen to God. They wanted Moses to be in between. What do you think God will feel about this? If you were God, what would you feel? Hurt? I would hurt. Yes, that would hurt me. But listen to what God said to Moses. The Lord responded, I've heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken to you. They are right in all that they have spoken. Oh, that they had such a heart in them, that they would fear me and always keep all my commandments, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. He didn't mind it. God said, good. That's good. I wish that this would impress on them. The most important thing is the commandments. That they would remember the commandments with such fear. So it's not about me. They fear me or they don't fear me. It's about actually, because the commandments is going to be their life. They do it, they will live. They don't do it, they will. So in all this show of power, what concern did God have in heart? Himself or them? Them. Sometimes a parent will do this. A parent may act angry and they are violent, but deep down in their hearts, this is because they are careful for their own, or caring for their own dignity and honor, or caring for the child who's going to do destruction to himself or herself. Why the parent is showing anger? If they are sincere and good parents, for their sake or for the sake of the child? For the sake of the child. That's what it is. So the whole point is that the commandments that God has given for them to have better life, but if they don't follow it, and it is not impressed on them, they would not remember it. So the beginning of all the precautions that God has done, the memory of this horrible, terrible, scary theophany, they would always remember in the mind of the Israelites, God showed himself to us with the terrible signs. And don't get on the wrong side of him. It is not good. Always try to be on his good list. Later in Deuteronomy, Moses wrote about God's response to the request for a mediator. And he said this, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear, according to all you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see this great fire anymore, lest I die. This request is fulfilled in Christ. He said, a prophet like me, God will raise, and he will speak all my words to you. And this happened. In John 6, when Jesus did the miracle of 5 loaves and 2 fish, what did the people say? This is truly the prophet who should come to the world. They referred to this. When they got terrified and said, let us have a mediator. Moses, you be the mediator, you speak to him. And God says, perfect. I will do another prophet like you. And anyone who doesn't listen to that prophet, I'm going to send. Why did he call his son prophet? We talked about this in Dogma. There would be any chance of God saying, I have a son hidden, you will see him. Actually, in fact, every time that Israel speaks to someone, it's to Christ. He was the spokesman for God all the time. The Father nobody had seen. So it would make sense for them to know that God is Father, Son, Holy Spirit at the time? Absolutely not. It would drive them crazy. Because they just came out of Egypt with multiple gods. He cannot tolerate this. So he's going to have to call him and is he a prophet? In which sense? He is the spokesperson for the Father. He's the Word of the Father. Perfectly fitting. Now we move to the commandments. The Ten Commandments and the covenant with blood. So God uttered the Ten Commandments from the mountain in Exodus 20, and then immediately was a sacrifice the next day, next morning, early morning. They sacrificed and made the seal the covenant with the sacrifice. The Ten Commandments were given twice. Just you remember that. Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. There are subtle differences between the two renderings of the commandments, especially on the Sabbath. The reasoning for why God gave the Sabbath in the Exodus 20 is one thing, and the other one in Deuteronomy is another thing. The reasoning in Deuteronomy was for the sake of man, for the servants, for the slaves, for the children, for the animals, to take rest. While the number of the commandments into 10 words is consistent in the three main traditions. What traditions we're talking about? Rabbinic Jews, Hellenistic Jews, and church fathers. They're one group. The Catholic and the Lutheran is the third group. The division of the 10 varies. What am I saying here? You have three traditions of keeping the commandments. What Bible do the Rabbinic Judaism, the Rabbinic Jews have? It's the Hebrew, right? What Bible do the Hellenistic Jews and the church fathers have? If you remember from our first time. The Septuagint, the Greek. And the Catholic and the Lutheran have the Vulgate as the Latin version. There's difference. Okay. Did the Samaritan woman also refer to this prophet like Moses when she told Jesus? Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. This is true. The Samaritan woman, being a Samaritan, they didn't have the prophets. They only have the Torah of Moses as a Bible. And they had the prophet like Moses. Now, the commandments, and I want you to study this. This is important. You have questions on it in the quiz. The commandments are the same, but how we number them is different. From Rabbinic Jews to Hellenistic and church fathers to the Catholics. It's confusing because of the first two and the last one. The first two columns, Rabbinic and Hellenistic, are going to be similar in most part. What's totally different is the Catholic. We're going to see that. So the first commandment, as we've seen before in the promises, the Jews will recognize, I am the Lord your God, as a commandment, as they recognized it as a promise of sanctification. So that the name of God is the first. In their mind, they couldn't ignore this as a very significant item in the Decalogue. The Decalogue starts by the self-revelation of God. God is declaring himself, I am the Lord. So actually they say, the rest of the commandments are built on this one. If God is not God, then the rest of them means nothing. So that's what they say. This has to be self-identification of God as separate command. That's number one. While we, the church fathers, the Hellenistic Jews, they jump into immediately don't have other gods. That becomes number one. Don't have any other gods. What about the Catholics? They say, what's the difference between gods and images? It's the same. So they actually jump ahead more even. So they take the second and the third to become the first one, the gods and the images. The second one, which is our first one, they act like the Catholics. So they add the other gods and the images together. While in the church father Hellenistic, they say just the images. The second don't have any images. What about the Catholics? They move on. The name of God. Don't mention the name of God in a false oath. Swear by God when you don't mean to do anything. The third one is the false oath. In false oath in both of us, the rabbinic and both of the rabbinic and the Hellenistic false oath. But then they jump the Catholic to the Sabbath. So the Catholic and the Lutheran will keep ahead of us by one all the time to the end. But how they balance it at the end? They split coveting a wife as a separate commandment from coveting property. They say we cannot equate the two. Coveting a wife is as much by itself is a commandment, and coveting property is not the same. All right. So let's keep up there for a little bit. what I want to do is, if we are going to do anything with any of the commandments, we'll keep the middle row. This is ours. Okay? But you understand where they are going. Let's go down. Let's get some notes. They are the 10 words by which God made his people. God uttered 10 words in the 6 days of creation to make life on earth. The 10 commandments are the creating words of Israel as the people of God. You think about it as almost God is creating his people. He's making them. The first 4 commandments are concern the relationship with God. The last 6 commandments concern the relationship with people. I'm talking again on the middle column. If you say first 4, talking about middle column, because that's what we have. 8 commandments are in the negation form. Do not. Do not have other gods. Do not utter the name of the Lord in vain. Do not kill. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not covet. And 2 are in the positive form. Keep the Sabbath holy and honor your father and your mother. The commandments are the code of living that bring the characters of people of God to reflect the characters of God. So this is a code of living, because if you're going to be my wife or my children, you need to know how I am dealing with things, how I think about things. So this actually reflects an image of God. Who is God? There is no other gods. He is the only God, the true God. There is nothing like him. That's the second commandment. There is nothing like God. The name of God is very powerful. The day of the Lord is the day of consecration, blessing and sanctifying. The parents is very important because they reflect God's image, and because God is Father and he has a son. God is life and he's interested in living. God is pure and he's interested in purity. God is honest and interested in honesty. God is satisfied and complete and perfect, and he's the source of sanctification and completion and perfection. So don't covet. So in this way, God is showing himself to his children, to his people, and having them transform themselves to be like him. That's the whole point. To be like God. That's the main reason God created Adam in the beginning, to be in his image and to be like God, is to like what God likes, to be like him in every way possible. And because God was not revealed in a clear way in the Old Testament, God didn't show himself. Visitation here and there, but not really in a very clear way. The commandments were more about what God is not. God is not a murderer. God is not a covetous God. Does not like the Greek gods, you know. You have a God of love, a God of war, a God of this, a God of that, a God of revenge, a God of, you know. The commandments were not more about what God is not. In the New Testament, the commandment refers to who God is, and with reference to his Son, he said the one commandment that he gives us in the New Testament, love one another as I have loved you. Meaning, now you know what it seems like, what God is like. But in the Old Testament, nobody could say what God is like. He had to give commandment. The commandments were arranged in order of importance. Blasphemy, insulting parents, murder, and adultery were capital offenses and were punishable with death. They were put in the very beginning. The 4 about God, then immediately the parents. Then after that, the 2 other ones, the murder and adultery. Those 4 were very significant. They're punishable by death if someone breaks them. While many of the laws in the Torah were completed by the coming of Christ, the 10 commandments are durable. Christ and the holy apostles taught the keeping of the 10 commandments. They have many references. These are not to be annihilated or stopped by coming of Christ. The last point is the covenant ceremony. The covenant ceremony, the book of covenant and the blood of the covenant. So Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments and all the people. This is when they said, go talk to him and come talk to us. So he came, he went talk to God, and he was terrified, came back and told them all the words. And they answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has said will do. What is that? They agree to the terms of the covenant. They agree. So God gave them the commandments, said, we will do that. Okay. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. They do this in antiquity to make a witness. Like they will go back to those pillars and remember, we made those pillars in our covenant with God. They stand here for us. We go, we die, but those pillars will continue to be a witness against us. Then he sent young men. Whose young men? And of the children of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offering of oxen to the Lord. What do you think those young men were? The firstborn. The firstborn of Israel who were consecrated to God in Egypt by the Passover. We talked about this enough. So, and Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled it on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord had said, we will do and be obedient. They said the Amen. This is when the whole congregation said Amen. When you say it in the liturgy today. Very liturgical. So the book of the covenant, that's where he wrote the commandments. And he took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you according to all these words. Where do you hear the blood of the covenant again? Take, drink, all of you. This is the blood of the new covenant. So Jesus is repeating the words of Moses because we are in a new covenant. So those people had to be sprinkled with the blood to be in the covenant with God. And we are sprinkled with the new blood of the new covenant. After reading commandments, the people agreed to do them. Moses wrote them down in a book. The next morning, they built an altar and offered sacrifices. Moses took the blood of the sacrifices, sprinkled it on the book and on the people, and sealed the covenant between God and Israel. They became his people. He became their God. Last step of the covenant is the coming one. The meal. Then Moses went up, also Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders whom he appointed in chapter 18, the judges, and they saw the God of Israel. Again, they saw him, but not in the fire and the smoke. They saw something, a manifestation of God, most probably the Son, sitting on a throne, and under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire, blue pavement, blue clear pavement, like a glass that is bluish in color. And it was like the very heavens in its clarity, very clear. But on the nobles of the children of Israel, the 70, he did not lay his hand. He didn't touch them. So they saw God, and they ate and drank. What's that? What's the point of this meal? It's a celebration. We made a covenant. Let's go and celebrate. They eat. Of course, God doesn't eat. So he's going to sit there, and they were having the fun meal. The liturgical meal that completed the covenant ceremony. This has to be done. 3, the golden calf and the tabernacle. While God was giving Moses the tablets of stone, so after that, God told him to come up to put those commandments into stone so that they will be like the pillars forever, that they will always see them from generation to generation and know that they are there, a witness against them. They call the tablets of witness. With the 10 commandments written on them, the people were making the golden calf. It was meant as a representation of God. The real thing of the golden calf is not to replace God. Most probably, they said, okay, we've been through a major event, and now all of a sudden everything is quiet. Oh, we do have the manna every day. That's fine. We got used to this. It's boring. We do have the scene, the mountain. It's burned. We have the altar empty. Where's Moses? Gone. All the big bang that we were seeing in the celebration of the covenant is almost all of it is quieted. After a few days, they said, okay, now what? Maybe Moses will never come back. So we need something. We need something to look at. We need something to live by. So they said, let's make a golden calf. They have a memory of what the Egyptians used to do. So he immediately went on working to get a golden calf to represent God. Most commentators will say this, more than actually worshiping an idol, they wanted something to go to look at, see. Although this is a violation of the commandment, second commandment. It is a capital offense. But it suits them as humans. We're humans. We want something human. We don't want, theophanies. This was an indirect violation of the second commandment. The people wanted to secure the presence of God among them. God would give the instruction to build the tabernacle, and the tabernacle is where God's presence will be secured for Israel. We're going to talk about the tabernacle maybe next time. So the last piece, I thought it was last one. The Shema and the Deuteronomy, the precautions. This is a short one, not big. Now, Moses has to make sure that they don't forget the commandments. And Deuteronomy, he writes his own commentary on the events, and he gives this piece. And this piece is the most important piece for any Jewish today and across the ages to recite and know. As you know our Father, from your kindergartner, this is known by any Jewish boy. And they call it the Shema prayer. Shema in Hebrew means to sama', to listen, hear. So they call it the Shema prayer. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. This is chapter 6 in Deuteronomy. What did he give in chapter 5? We said that before. The commandments. So I said the commandments are found in Exodus 20 and in Deuteronomy. So he gives them again the commandments, and after he gives the commandments, what he does? He gives them the Shema. What does the Shema say? Listen, the commandments I give you today, you shall teach them, you shall be in your heart, you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and you shall be a frontlets before your eyes. This was said before in the Passover Haggadah. He said in chapter 12 and 13, this phrase was given there too. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Israel and the rabbis, since Moses, they actually do this literally. Literally, I'm telling you. Let's see how they do it. First of all, let's talk about the greatest commandments. The greatest commandments are the 2-point summaries of the 10 commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, which is the summary of the first 4, according to the Hellenistic and the Church Fathers. And the summary of the last 6 commandments is to be found in Leviticus. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. That is Leviticus 19:18. Let's go to the precautions. So that the greatest commandments which Jesus is going to recite to the people who come to ask him what is the greatest commandment, he's going to say those 2. The Deuteronomy summary of the first 4 and the Leviticus summary of the last 6. We get it? Remember the reference. Deuteronomy 6:4 and Leviticus 19:18. Go backwards. So it's 6:4, 19:18. The precautions that Moses listed for them to remember the commandments all the time. So he said, in addition to summarizing the first 4 commandments from the Decalogue into one, Decalogue means 10 commandments, or the 10 words, into one of the 2 greatest commandments, the Shema demands a constant reminder of the commandments. This would consume energy and time invested in different ways. For example, in your heart, teaching them diligently to your children, talk of them when you sit, walk, lie down, or rise up, bind as a sign on your hand, frontlets between your eyes, write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Why is this? Because he understood, Moses understood. This is the heart of the covenant right now. This is all what you need to do to keep God's favor and presence among you. Otherwise, we will put ourselves as enemies against God. To apply the Shema, righteous Israelites taught the commandments diligently to their children, neighbors, and citizens of their cities. They installed a mezuzah on the doorpost. What's a mezuzah? It's a box, a long box, where actually the Shema prayer is written on a parchment, a scroll. And every time a Jewish person, if you see any Jews in a movie or something, or you see them in the neighborhood, they will touch it and kiss it as they go in and out. Why? It is their reminder of the commandments. They also have what we call the tefillin. Tefillin is the Hebrew word for the phylacters. Phylacters are more of the European word. It is a box here. It's a box with leather straps. They bind on their frontlets, on the forehead, and on their left arm with leather strips. And they used to do the prayers with it. So when they pray, they tie it around their arms and their forehead, and you can see that on the internet. When you write down tefillin, you will get this. You will get this picture. So what is this? These are reminders, precautions that they will do to keep reminding themselves of the commandments of God. So every time they go, this mezuzah is put on every door in the house except the bathroom, and they exempt also the storage rooms, the closets. But you go to the bedroom, it's there. You go to the hall, you go to the outside door, you go to the door that leads to the dining hall room, anywhere, living room, you will find it. Every time you go through a door, you get hit by that mezuzah. And on a daily basis in the morning and at night, you will have to tie those ones and then pray with them. And these are the tefillin and the mezuzah. Okay? These are the precautions from the Shema prayer. That's it. All right. Any questions? Okay. Mm-hmm. Where did it see they didn't eat? They ate and drank before the Lord, the God of Israel, and they didn't die. That's when Moses was invited to do the tablets. Let's read that part so that you... They ate and drank in the beginning, so let us... Yeah. They ate and drank. So they did eat and drink. Now, okay. That's what we know, that they actually celebrated. They just brought food, whatever food they had, most probably a lot of manna. and then some of the meat of the sacrifices. Because he said peace offerings. What is peace offering? It's a communal meal. Not like the burnt offerings. But burnt offerings, you don't touch it. You just give it, all of it, to God and burn it. But a peace offering is you sacrifice it, you burn the fat is burned to God on the altar, but the meat is shared between the priests and the offering and the family and the poor. They make a big invitation for everybody. The peace offerings is the meat of the celebration. Okay? I want to just to make a reminder quickly that when we do the baptism of a new baby, as a church, we always do it in a liturgy day, or we have to have a liturgy after it. Why? Because it's a covenant, and what is the sacrifice of that covenant? The sacrifice of him who said, take, drink, this is the blood of my new covenant, or the new covenant. So we have to give the baby and the family that peace offering, that we share that meal. And then after that, the family usually invite everybody for a dinner or a celebration, agape meal. And the church in the New Testament says that. We break bread and then we have an agape meal. So symbolized today by the bread that Abuna gives after we get done. That's the agape meal. Okay, let's say our Father. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, make us worthy, O Lord, to say thankfully, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory now and forever. May the love of God the Father and grace of His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. Live in peace. Peace be with you.